I've been in law enforcement for 10 years. I've seen officers nationwide enforcing tyrannical orders against the people. Because every time I turn on the television, every time I look to the internet, I'm seeing people arrested or cited for going to church, for traveling on the roadways, for going surfing, opening their businesses, and arrest them and charge them with what? With a crime? I don't know what crime people are committing. We need to start looking at ourselves as officers and thinking, is what I'm doing right? Now, I want to remind you that regardless of where you stand on the coronavirus, we don't have the authority to do those things to people just because a mayor or a governor tells you otherwise. We don't get to violate people's constitutional rights because somebody in our chain of command tells us otherwise.
In November 2020, Italian police removed their helmets in solidarity with protesters following 18 days of protesting. At the end of World War II, a series of tribunals were held in Nuremberg, Germany, for the prosecution of prominent members of the Nazi Party.
Opening the first trial in history for crimes against the peace of the world imposes a grave responsibility.
Their defense that they were just following orders was not enough to escape punishment. That same year, Yale University psychologist Stanley Milgram conducted a series of experiments that tested whether ordinary people would inflict harm on another person after following orders from an authoritative figure.
150 volts. Answer, horse.
Experiment, that's all. Get me out of here. Get me out of here, please.
Continue, please. Go right on.
I refuse to go on. Let me out.
The experiment requires you continue, teacher. Please continue.
Participants didn't know that the learner was really an actor and the so-called sharks harmless.
You're gonna get a shock. 180 volts.
Alarmingly, the results suggested that any human was capable of this due to feeling disconnected from their actions when they comply with orders. Following the trials, the Nuremberg Code was created to protect people's human rights. They include: voluntary consent is essential. Human experiments should be based on previous animal experimentation, and experiments should be conducted by avoiding suffering and injury. With the current rollout of the COVID-19 vaccination program, we now see these fundamental human rights being violated again.
We and others in the post-war consensus led to an international law that says that no medical procedure may be performed on a human being without their informed consent, and they must benefit from it. Your government doesn't have the right to override that law. So if people are saying you've got to, otherwise you can't go shopping, or you can't go to work or travel, take them to court. It's absolutely illegal, and no one should stand for it.
75 years ago, Hermann Goering testified at the Nuremberg trials, and he was asked, how did you make the German people go along with all this? And he said, it's an easy thing. It's not anything to do with Nazism. It has to do with human nature. The only thing a government needs to make people into slaves is fear. And if you can figure out something to make them scared, you can get them to do anything that you want. Governments love pandemics. They love pandemics for the same reason they love war, because it gives them the ability to impose controls on the population that the population would otherwise never accept. And we're telling them today, you are not going to take away our freedoms, you are not going to poison our children. We are going to demand our democracy back. Thank you all very much for fighting.
You know, 75 years ago, we had millions of men, 18-year-old boys, 19-year-old men, 20-year-old men, 23-year-old men, going out, fighting for king and country, for queen and country, fighting for liberties. These were brave, courageous young men. They were shitting themselves the night before they went to war. They were terrified, but they did it. And we now, today, us liberal intellectual men, We're too afraid to go on the street, to tear off a fucking mask off our face. Excuse my language. This is the only time it is relevant to use bad language. We have got to step out of the indentureship, the enslavement, because it is not going to just remove itself. There is no rescue mission. There is no cavalry coming to rescue us. This is going to get a lot worse. And now we can see it's out of control. How many tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people around the world have died from other matters connected to the forced lockdown, the self-isolationing, grandparents unable to look into the eyes of their children and their grandchildren. These are crimes against humanity that cannot even be calculated, okay? But when the audit is done, and it will be done, we will see that this Corona crowning event was the crowning glory of the emancipation of humanity. It is time for humanity to reclaim ourselves from this draconian tyranny. I'll leave it at that. Thank you very much.
So, do you believe that receiving the vaccine will enable our lives to return back to normal?
You're quite emotional by that.
Well, it's just, it's been such a tough year for so many people. We can get on with our lives.
Or will we see a new normal? A world with harsh, tyrannical rules, governed by a centralised totalitarian state. Here's what Klaus Schwab thinks.
People assume we are just going back to the good old world which we had, and everything will be normal again in how we are used to normal, in the old fashion. This is, let's say, fiction. It will not happen. Cut.
There is an incredible movement beginning to take form here in Spain. A group of police officers have come together to start an organization called Policías por la Libertad, Police for Freedom. And now we are marching together with them, standing up for our human rights and constitutional liberties. History tells us that once the peaceful resistance gains the support of the police or the military, we have 60% higher probability to be able to dismantle a tyrannical government. And this is what is taking place right now.
November 2020, Stockholm. Experts in healthcare, law and banking from around the world have formed an alliance with a mission to protect our freedoms.
Welcome everyone to Stockholm. My name is Professor Dolores Cahill from Ireland, and it is my great honour and privilege to welcome you to a worldwide organisation, the World Freedom Alliance. And our goal is to provide information for what has been happening, to try and coordinate that we can defend our freedoms and our rights, and that we can ensure that the governments that we elect will actually defend our freedoms and rights. So we want to educate you, we want to empower you, we want to welcome you to a world where you can be healthy, you can be free, and you can hold people to account if they do something wrong.
Many people have been hoodwinked into believing that the government give us our rights. That could not be further from the truth. Every constitution in the world is a code of conduct for governments to follow, to ensure and protect and defend and vindicate and uphold your rights, our rights, that have been given to us by our Creator. The government doesn't give us our rights. The government is obliged to protect those rights.
These positive images are reassuring and provide much needed hope. But significant economic damage has already been done. This would inevitably leave many dependent on receiving a universal basic income, placing us in a weaker position to rebel or oppose their tyrannical terms. But this might be a long way off. Or is it happening already?
Given this significant uncertainty, a worsening economic backdrop, and the need to give people and businesses security through the winter, I believe it is right to go further. So we can announce today that the furlough scheme will not be extended for 1 month. It will be extended until the end of March.
How will it end?